Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Welcome back, everyone, to the new Cyber Frontier. My name is Shawn Murray. I will be your host for this edition. We have a special couple of guests here with us today. We're going to welcome one of Colorado Springs' own, Blake Marvin. And he is the owner and solutions architect for his company, Avajen. He is joined by Joe Nelson, Colorado Springs firefighter, who is also part of the Avajen team, dealing with business relations. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having us.
Yeah. So, we were talking a few weeks ago, and you're contributing here into the ecosystem. We're going to have you at the Cybersecurity First Friday event for next month. The network of folks that we usually have for that event, between 100, 150, and some of the folks online, we'll get to hear what you guys are contributing to the ecosystem. But what I'd like to do is, why don't you tell us who you are, give us some background. You and your wife, Jen, started this company, and, just give us a little bit of background. Who are you, and tell us a little about your company.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for having us. The background on me, it's a long story. We'll give you the short version. I've been doing IT in some capacity for a little over 17 years at this point. And if I'm being really honest, a little before that. I technically started my first company working on computers when I was 12 years old.
Nice.
So it's something I've always known that I loved.
So you're a born entrepreneur.
I was born to do this. I know that. At 12 years old, I wanted to build computers. I went from building computers to building computer networks. And actually, when I was in high school, by the time I had graduated, I had built over 1,000 computers for various people. Started off as friends, gaming computers, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And graduated to friends' parents' businesses, networks, and that kind of got my feet wet. I was always into that, but then I started actually getting some real deal IT jobs in my early 20s. I left my companies at the time behind because I didn't know how to actually run a company,
right?
If we're being honest.
It was more of a hobby, right?
It was a hobby with a cool name and a logo.
Yeah. Occasionally got some money.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I spent more than I made, I think.
That's a hobby.
Yeah.
Early 20s, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then I went and got a couple of real IT jobs. And I worked through my younger 20s as a systems engineer for a couple different IT companies, and got a lot of exposure. I've always been an outsource. I've actually never internally done IT for a company, which I think is an interesting dynamic, because I think internal IT, you get a certain perspective on things, and I think seeing things from the outside, you get a certain perspective on things. And not necessarily one way being better than the other. I think they complement each other very well. But it's a unique perspective I've always had, seeing things kind of from the outside, while also a lot of the times we played the role of internal IT because we also ran people's entire networks.
Sure.
So it was an interesting way to kind of come up in the IT world, I think. When I was 25, I got my first job as a CTO of a company called Stone Tree Networks, where I was actually running the team. That was the first real team I got to run.
Was that here in Colorado?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, up in like Inglewood area.
Okay.
Yeah. And in that role, we dealt with a lot of healthcare. It was primarily healthcare. Did very well with that for a number of years until all the surgery centers and groups that we were working with started getting bought out. And we ended up that company ended up not succeeding in the long run.
Okay.
But I continued doing what I do. And a lot of my clients from back in those days, I actually took on the side after we ended up parting that. It was interesting. So I actually have my longest client of my own is actually about 11 years old at this point.
Okay.
And they came from that era. And I've been doing, like I said, been doing this for quite a while now at this point. But the idea for Avajen didn't come until, it was started off probably right around that time. I had my first idea of, at the time it was called Avajen.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a company that was intended to solve some problem. At the moment, I hadn't quite figured out what it was.
Sure.
And like all good businesses, you have to have a problem you're solving. And so what sort of evolved over the next few years in me kind of looking at the ecosystem in general and seeing what was being done out there was I found a lot of MSPs, which were in a similar space to where I was at the time, were putting out honestly some pretty bad work.
Okay.
We were running into a lot of clients that had just big misses on pretty obvious best practices with their IT. And, I tend to try to walk into every situation with a best practices approach. I know like groups like yours can go and do pen testing and that sort of thing. We don't live in the pen testing world. We work with guys like you to do that. Instead, we look at things from what are the best practices that we know and are we following them?
Okay.
And I didn't see that happening in a lot of places. And I felt like there was a lot of just overall neglect going on. We get something up and running, it works, we leave it and walk away. And nobody really coming back in and doing some checks and balances.
Sustainment.
Yeah. And so, I really wanted to put a system in place that required us to check ourselves in addition to checking other people's work. And I wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, our heart was based on making sure that our clients not only felt secure, but had something backing that up.
Okay.
And so that's where Avajen really started coming into play, is the more of these networks I saw that just had obvious misses with, best practices, whether it's firewall management, identity management, go on down the list of things that they maybe weren't doing right, and things that we could definitely do better for them.
Okay.
I wanted to start making a standardized approach to do that. And I wanted to have a team that A, had no ego. Let's check the ego at the door. B, didn't mind having their work checked. And that's part of our system. You do it, now he looks at it.
Sure.
And we don't ever walk out the door until both people agree. And sometimes we might need to bring in a third or a fourth person in order to really vet out a solution and guarantee that we as a company feel like we've done a good job and we followed all the best practices for that particular system or that particular part of their IT for a particular company. So all that to say, we come around to what is Avajen today. We're an MSP. At its core, that's what we do. We come in and we build and maintain networks for businesses. I would say small to medium businesses for the most part, somewhere in the ballpark of 50 to a couple hundred employees is the sweet spot. And then we've got clients that are larger than that. We've got a client that's smaller than that. But that's the primary focus of what we do. We also do have a professional services arm. So we do some work with much larger enterprises and bigger entities that have full IT staffs and have full security departments and InfoSec teams with CISOs and so on and so forth. But we, that's kind of a secondary leg of what we do. Our primary goal is to really help support the small to medium businesses of the world, ideally with the same level of expectation out of their network that you have in a bigger enterprise.
That's awesome. So we're talking to Blake Marvin. Blake and his wife Jen are the owners, founders of a local managed service provider here in the Colorado Springs area. We'll be right back after this message and continue talking to Blake and Joe about Avajen.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain-managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Shawn Murray, New Cyber Frontier. We've got Blake Marvin from Avajen. He and his wife, Jen, have started up this company. Lots of experience dating back many years of information technology, doing IT systems, networks, maintenance, strong focus. I guess what I really like to hear, and I'll tell you, we've had 3 or 4 cyber breaches locally. One was a real estate firm. One was a tax and accounting firm. And I'm talking literally over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And some of the issues that we see, like Microsoft Office 365 environment, right? So an adversary gets a hold of your account. Your account's being managed by a managed service provider. So not a managed security service provider, but a managed service provider. And it's the lack of knowledge of a 900-page security document that tells you how to secure, Microsoft Office 365. So what I really liked in the description is how, as a solutions architect, you can walk into an organization, provide capabilities, but somebody else is going to come behind and make sure that it was implemented correctly, right? Or configured appropriately. And if you need to bring in the rigor of a third person or someone else, with your background with healthcare, highly regulated industry, it's not just about technology, right? It's understanding the critical business processes that are in place, how, 80% of those processes are usually automated in any industry. And so there's security implications on how you do that.
Right.
Explain how your team understands how all those pieces go together. It's not really just about IT. It's about enabling the business to be productive and allow them to focus on their core competencies while you manage their infrastructure. Right.
Yeah, no, it's good that you mentioned all that. So our team has a few different ways that we go about that. Obviously, we have our internal checks and balances, like you mentioned. I also like that you mentioned third parties. It's critical, especially, so we still have medical clients today, and it's critical once a year at least. We bring in a third party that has nothing to do with our company. There's a few particular ones we use to do both pen testing and just overall looks at our environment from a security perspective. We do security risk assessment, we call it.
Okay.
And the security risk assessment, they'll come in and they examine everything from the processes we have to the security, both from an outside perspective, just, hitting ports on a firewall, and to things like, making sure that our people aren't clicking on stuff in an email they're not supposed to click on.
Right.
And which someone fails every year. I mean, it's somebody
the number
does.
one most successful method, right?
Yeah. And, and it's good to do that constantly or as often as you can, because, like you said, people, their core competency is in IT. Our medical providers, their core competency is helping you feel better, figuring out what's wrong with you. And they don't have the time to constantly sit there and understand how they're going to get attacked in this IT world. And these attacks are so good now. I mean, these guys they're brilliant that are coming up with this stuff.
Pretty sophisticated stuff.
Really, truly. And so the more we train our customers to help themselves, the better. But then implementing things like you mentioned, Office 365. Office 365, it's crazy. We were actually in the process of doing an IT assessment back. This was in March. During the IT assessment, I was standing on at the client site, and everyone starts panicking. I'm like, oh no, what's going on? So I kind of walk to where the fire is, right, and find out they accidentally wired about $2 million to the wrong account.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah, that's a big problem.
And did a little quick tracing. It didn't take long to figure out what happened. An attacker came in and spoofed a domain. They bought a domain that looked exactly like the domain that the other recipient was.
Yep.
It was one letter off, but it looked right. I had to take a double take before I recognized it because it was so close. And they copied the email format to a T. They actually inserted them. So they had hacked somebody's email account, which wasn't hard because at the time their passwords were horrible. And so they hacked somebody's email account, got into their email, inserted themselves into a already going email thread regarding this wire transfer that had to happen.
Wow.
And then all they did was said, hey, by the way, we have a new account number. Let me just send that to you. Sent the account number, didn't get caught, accounts payable, switched it out, and the wire went out. Simple as that. It was something that seemed so impossible for them, and then at the same time, it was so simple for somebody to do this. And I mean, at the core, there were a couple issues. One was weak passwords. Passwords in general, as far as I'm concerned, aren't good enough.
Sure.
I don't care how strong you think your password is. It's not good enough. Externally, always MFA. We have multiple factor authentication everywhere. But when you talk about Office 365 specifically, I mean, they give you all these tools.
Sure.
You just have to configure them.
Right.
And the problem is, anybody can set up an Office 365 account. You don't need me to go set up an Office 365 account. But it helps if you have somebody like our team who can come in there and make sure that your Office 365 account isn't as easy as a simple password crack to get into somebody's email and to insert themselves into a chain where they can later steal $2 million from you. So it's simple things that they're really not that they're not that simple when you really get into the nitty gritty of it, but they're things that if you have the right coach, which is essentially what we try to be for our clients, we're going to tell you, you need multi-factor authentication, possibly even internally. Passwords are no better internally than they are externally.
Sure.
And people can crack your perimeter physically just a lot easier than you think they can.
Yeah, sometimes it just comes down to having physical access, right?
Yep.
We are talking to Blake Marvin from Avajen. We're going to continue this conversation right after this message.
Blockframe technology offers next-generation blockchain-managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Shawn Murray, New Cyber Frontier. We're talking to Blake Marvin from Avajen, solutions engineer, owner, founder, managed service provider. We know that a managed service provider mainly focuses on IT solutions, but it's almost a strong flavor as an MSSP, right? Where you may not be providing a SOC as a service, but almost everything you do has to be considered with a certain element of security, right?
Yep.
And you're talking about things like multi-factor authentication for Microsoft Office 365, which gets even more dynamic if I start integrating and maybe a hybrid on-prem with my Active Directory and my Microsoft Azure, or maybe it's 100% cloud-based, right? Then you start talking about getting access to additional sensitive software resources that can really wreak havoc with some of the things that you discussed. So when we talk about the client base, very small to, mainly focusing on medium to small medium size small business, what are the dynamics between, say, maybe a large business, a larger medium-sized business to one of your large corporate clients? What do the relationships look like between you and the client, going back to your initial introduction of, hey, it's not just plug and play anymore. There has to be a sustained relationship, operation, sustainment of your environment. How do you have those discussions from the medium size, contrast that to the large size?
Yeah, it's definitely a slightly different conversation. I mean, very similar content, but the way we discuss it's different. Our larger enterprise clients that we do professional services with, a lot of times we handle a silo. We handle a small piece of what they need. But at the same time, we get exposure to all these other pieces of things that are going on in their environment. And I think, as a general rule, we always take it upon ourselves to be an advisor to them, just like we would for our smaller, fully managed clients, where if I see bad practices, like I'll give you a good, for instance, there was a client in the financial world, does banking transactions, and they have an amazing set of security protocols in place. They have a great InfoSec team whose firewalls are the envy of probably a lot of people.
You don't hear that very often.
Yeah. Those guys know how to make Palo Alto sing. We'll just say that.
That's awesome.
But the flip side to that was we saw some very interesting behaviors going on in a different team on their infrastructure side that was handling how their file shares were being distributed in their DFS. For those of you who don't know, distributed file system. And the core permissions at the base of every single one of those shares actually allowed the everyone group full control, which
we could go around
anyone
there.
who doesn't know, that's not a good thing. And for a fintech, that's really not good. So I wasn't there to work on that. I was there actually deploying a VDI solution, but clearly an issue that we needed to discuss. And so, we always keep our eyes open for, again, best practices. If we're seeing a best practice not being followed, we call it out and we'll have those discussions. And if we need to bring in other teams, we'll have those discussions, even if it's not necessarily part of the scope of what we were brought in to do.
Sure.
Because I don't just look at, I look at a statement of work for what it needs to be, but at the same time, I also look at the business that I'm trying to help and the people behind that business. And it's important to those people that business is doing things the right way. And we'll never turn a blind eye to something like that. Meanwhile, our other clients, you asked about the small or medium ones. We have an interesting relationship with them because when we walk in there, to a certain degree, they kind of put their network in our hands, and by proxy, they kind of put their business in our hands. And that's a very serious thing that someone's doing when they give you the level of control and power over their business that they are doing.
Sure.
And it's something that our team, we talk about it frequently. The level of responsibility that we carry as IT people, and every day that we wake up and talk to these people, our goal is to understand what are the best practices right now, what are the current attack vectors that we need to be protecting against that people know about, and obviously there's always those unknown 0 days,
right? But
there are some real obvious ones out there that a lot of people don't know. And it's surprising to the level they don't know them. So we constantly are educating ourselves so that we can properly educate our clients and really try to play an advisory role, make sure that whatever decisions they make, at the end of the day, they get to make the choice on what we are or aren't going to do in their networks, but at least that they're making an informed decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's unique with small business, right? Because I work over with the as a consultant for the Small Business Development Center here within our community. And so you'll get small businesses that are coming through and they just don't know what they don't know, back to your point, right? And then when you start looking and making recommendations, sometimes it's overwhelming for a small business owner. And back to your point of being able to that business owner to transfer or share the risk associated with managing the IT environment to a managed service provider like Avajen, right?
Yep.
Allows them to focus on their core competencies, be productive, and then, come back at some point and, hey, here's a strategy. What would it take to get there? And at the same time, having the context to be able to come back, recognize other challenges that the client may not know about. Some people might look at that as upselling or trying to grow your footprint. There is a business strategy behind that, but if the approach is more to identify risk, the business owner gets to make the decision at the end of the day. That's really what it's all about.
Right.
So for small business, that's an awesome approach. And so as a managed service provider within the community, your portfolio, you've talked about some of those more on the consulting side. What about remote management, remote administration of organizations, environments as well? Can you explain some of that type of work?
Yeah, so we do actually a good portion of our work is done remotely. In fact, we're actually one of those strange companies that doesn't have an office, and we have enough employees now that people have asked, "Why don't you have an office?"
Right? Sketchy.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, seriously, right? There's a couple of business reasons why not to have an office, but also part of it I think is just the shifting trend in how we work, and we have a very secure platform that we use to take care of our own internal communications. We do have servers, we do have infrastructure. It just resides in a cloud environment and a data center environment. But as far as how we do remote work with the clients, we have a couple different ways we do that, primarily through our what we call an RMM platform. So we have a remote monitoring management platform, which is kind of an all-in-one tool for us that helps us manage a few different things. So we have a help desk. Any of our fully managed clients, where we manage their whole network, they have a couple different ways to get in touch with us. They can call us from a 1-800 number, which rings directly to our NOC team, or they can send an email to our what we call our NOC email address.
Okay.
And that goes to our help desk team, which is also side by side with our network operations center, where we monitor and do live monitoring of every network we have. So we have a series of dashboards, a series of alerts and notifications. If there's a hiccup at a site that we manage, we know about it. Oftentimes, by the time the ticket comes in, we've already called somebody and told them, "Hey, we're on this." But as far as everyone's computers goes, let's say there's remote managing of servers. We can remote into a server. We can make changes. We can also, with a single click of a button, access someone's workstation and get onto it.
Okay.
One thing that I really like with our platform is, some people get weirded out by that, think Big Brother's watching. and I understand that. One thing that's great with our platform is it announces us on the way in. So when we get on your computer, it clearly says right on your screen, hey, if it was me, it would say, Blake Marvin is accessing your computer right now.
Right.
Which I think is good because it helps with the transparency with our clients so that they know we're not just looking in on them and doing that kind of Big Brother stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's a different role, really.
Yeah.
So, there's just so much in your footprint. We're getting towards the end of our segment, and we could go on for at least another hour.
For sure.
What I'd like to kind of pivot on is, so you have contracts that you're going after.
Yep.
Some government contract stuff, and in the next 2 minutes, give us the vision. Where's Avajen heading in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see Avajen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Next 5 to 10 years. Shortest version I can come up with. Avajen is, we're going to continue building our primary core focus, which is our managed services contracts. At the same time, Our professional services wing has really picked up steam, and I really enjoy being able to do that. In fact, I think by doing that, it serves both sets of clients better because we see how the other side of the world is doing things.
Sure.
And it keeps us engaged in both of those because there are differences in an enterprise network versus a small to medium business network. And a lot of those differences can really actually be leveraged in the other if you, allow it. So we're going to keep building both of those things. I think at the end of the day, as far as where we're going, we're going to grow. We're going to grow through a couple different things. The biggest thing is we're taking the time and really proving that what we care about at the end of the day is our client. And not that there aren't other people out there doing that, but there are people that aren't doing that.
Right.
And I think there's far too many of them, if I'm being honest. And my goal, frankly, is to shed light on the people that need to do better, and to help find the people that are being underserved and serve them appropriately and help give them the true warm and fuzzies they need, that their IT infrastructure is being handled properly. Not just from a security perspective, but truly understanding the mission and vision of what these organizations are doing. These people, whatever they're doing, they've set out on a mission and they're trying to accomplish something in the world. And IT usually is just one of those things that helps them get there.
Right. Enables the business.
Enables it. They don't care how many servers we have or how they're set up. They just want it to work, and they want it to truly enable their vision and their mission. And that's what I want to do as well. I want to help them identify where we can maybe do that better. This is what you guys are trying to do and you're doing it this way. Well, what if we did this? And really try to open up new horizons for other people's visions, but do it in a safe way and do it in a way that as much as possible, we can mitigate risk and we can help people to sleep soundly at night.
Yeah. Rest assured that, those 80% of those business processes that are being managed from a managed service provider's perspective with an element of security, awareness, privacy, that level of care, the quality assurance that goes along with your approach to maintaining your clients' relationships. How does a client contact you?
It's really easy. 2 ways. We have a website, which is www.avajen.com, and that's spelled with a J, by the way.
Okay.
Little tricky thing there. My wife's name is Jennifer, and Avajen stands for Advanced Generation Networks.
Outstanding.
Yeah, but the G just wasn't cool enough, so we went with a J.
That's awesome.
Little tribute to the wife.
All right. Well, perfect. And then how else can they contact you?
855-755-6444.
Outstanding. So this will wrap up this edition of the New Cyber Frontier. I am talking to Blake Marvin. He's an architect, solutions engineer, founder, owner of Avajen. I really appreciate you and Joe coming in and sharing what you're doing over there at Avajen and what you're contributing here locally to the ecosystem.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.